Um, Welcome, folks, to the second forum on the Municipal Labor Committee and the current situation in regard to healthcare in New York City for public employees. Uh, my name is John Hyland. I'm a retired sociology professor from LaGuardia Community College, and currently active in the retiree chapter, and for 6 years the treasurer of the PSC. We have, we think, a very good program, and we thank you for coming and hopefully participating. I'll just start off with a brief sort of framework and ground rules. As I said, the focus is on a continuing understanding, analysis of the Municipal Labor Committee and its role in the healthcare situation in New York City for public employees, and that is not a standing issue. It's related to a national issue. Right? This is it's an issue of privatization and profitization of healthcare, and it's connected to a whole national struggle that's going on. On the other hand, we want to focus on that. We don't want to be trying to deal with the international scene and the results of the election and other things that might be on our mind. We want to stay focused. The format is that there will be 6 people speaking, a couple of us more briefly, and then 5 speakers who will be speaking for 12-minute periods. So after that, there'll be another period of time, close to an hour, of discussion. That is input, participation from the folks who are here. Okay, so you have the speakers, the presenters, and then open to the speaker, to the audience, if you will, participants. I just want to remind folks that there's a chat box with this, and that can be useful in terms of people putting questions in there for later discussion, and any other kinds of communication that people want to make with each other. Before I go further, I want to thank the people who have helped to make this possible. Boyd Johnstone, a faculty member from Borough Manhattan Community College and a member of a faculty organizing group, Rafa CUNY-wide, has been essential. We wouldn't be having this without her capacity to make it happen, and we appreciate that. And that we want to thank the speakers who have, given their time and energy and ideas and so forth to it. They'll be introduced shortly. And let's see. I think that's about it for the introduction and the focus and the framework. So I'm going to just start off with a few comments, and then we'll go to Mike Frank, and then to the other presenters. So we're here today to continue thinking through the role of the Municipal Labor Committee in the New York City labor movement, particularly for, obviously, municipal workers in service and retirees, full-time and part-time. And we are concerned because, given the MLC's collaboration with the New York City's Office of Labor Relations in relation to our health benefits, a committee of the MLC's leadership has been negotiating with the city for several years to reduce the city's healthcare costs by $600 million a year. And they would do this by moving municipal retirees from our promised coverage of real Medicare, covering 80%, and supplemental insurance, covering the other 20%. They want to move us from that, which we've had for a number of years, to privatized, profit-seeking insurance and changing plans for in-service workers. These negotiations were carried out with zero transparency for and participation by rank and file members in a very undemocratic process. On this past April 13th, we held a first forum at which an excellent panel of presenters generated important information, analysis, and discussion. Today, we want to continue that work, expand the circle of participants, and move toward action. We want to understand what the Municipal Labor Committee has been, currently is, and what it can be. So some of us have been led by our reading and thinking to the events and dynamics of the 1975-76 fiscal crisis in New York City. The main influences have been some reading, for example, Working Class New York by Josh Freeman, The Abuse of Power by Jack Newfield and Paul DeBrule, and Bill Tabb's The Long Default. We realize that there are many more important works on this topic. These were helpful to us at this point. The picture that emerged from this reading and thinking is that the New York City labor movement in the post-World War II decades made advances in the material and social conditions of the working class, for example, in housing and healthcare and other areas. As the larger political economy began to shift and to decline, marked by decline in profits from the U.S. post-war dominance, the New York City's fiscal management was not up to the changes, and the city government relied more and more on borrowing. The banks that had profited from the loans, facing their own problems, pulled the plug as the debt kept climbing and demanded major concessions from the city government and the labor movement. The city administration basically turned governance over to an unelected private power elite of the large financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, Wall Street, the real estate industry. The working class that built, maintained, and operated the structures and services that were the basis of New York City's extraordinary wealth took the hit. Labor unions were threatened with city bankruptcy results in which they would lose their contracts and the rights to collective bargaining. We lost jobs. We lost services. Some public sector unions reacted with marches and protests, but they tended to be piecemeal and lacked a coordinated and militant push. Union leaders ultimately complied and contributed pension fund money to pull the city out of the crisis. The money was eventually repaid over time, but the script of the resolution of the crisis became the modus operandi of the public sector union leadership: a defensive posture, concessions, and partnering. That is, as in the case of the helping the city cut healthcare costs. So a key issue for us now is how do we rebuild a more offensive, militant, confident, participatory labor movement in the public sector based on a strong sense of how human labor, the concrete working class, makes the conditions for the growth of profits and capital, while workers experience an ongoing struggle to sustain and develop their lives. In this context, we ask, what is the role of the Municipal Labor Committee? I turn it over here to Mike Frank, who is a longtime PSC activist.
Good afternoon. In order to understand the MLC's concessionary labor politics and its secretive modus operandi, we have to examine how labor leaders reacted to the fiscal crisis of 1975 and 1976. The proximal cause of the fiscal crisis was that banks stopped buying municipal bonds. The distal cause was the end of the post-war boom. Linking these two levels are complex mediations that we can't go into here. The New York banks demanded deep cuts before they would renew investing in bonds. There was significant resistance to this from labor and communities. Just a few examples. The MLC itself called a downtown demonstration at a major bank. 10,000 angry workers showed up. As far as I know, this was the first, last, and only time that the MLC organized a demonstration. The turnout and the anger frightened both Felix Rohatyn, a key banker, and Victor Gottbaum, head of DC 37. Both sides of the class divide. The Delegate Assembly of the United Federation of Teachers pressed Albert Shanker to call a strike. Sanitation workers went on a 3-day wildcat strike. Highway workers blocked the Henry Hudson Parkway. Laid-off policemen blocked the Brooklyn Bridge and let the air out of car tires. The action was contagious. Doctors, nurses, and even patients blocked the bridge. There were community protests against closing firehouses and reducing the number of firemen. Students and faculty at City College rallied against tuition. Labor leaders, on the other hand, eschewed, building on the ferment and actions from below. They were overawed and cowed by the power of the New York banks. The crucial decision not to organize and lead a movement was made without any consultation or input from union members. We cannot say what the outcome of such a movement would have been, but we can describe what happened when this road was not taken. Tens of thousands of municipal workers were laid off. Pensions for future retirees were reduced. Hospitals were closed. There were serious cuts in city social services. Transit fares were increased, and tuition was imposed at City University for the first time, and more. Austerity impacted not only municipal workers, but the city's broad working class. Epidemiologists trace the increased rates of diabetes and homicide to cuts in social services. The overall quality of working class life deteriorated. As important as these material effects of austerity were, changes in the consciousness of municipal workers were equally, if not more important, in the light of their long-term effects. The absence of a general movement against austerity led to an end of the disruptive actions by the militant minority. The demoralization of this activist layer gave rise to a fatalistic mood that cuts were inevitable. And the false lesson drawn from this experience was that strikes and protests simply don't work. Apathy and the lack of a left implanted in our unions have muted opposition to the subpar contracts that labor leaders have negotiated for municipal workers to this day. And there was no left to serve as a collective memory of the class conflict surrounding the fiscal crisis and draw the actual lessons of that experience for a new generation of workers. A turning point was reached in the fiscal crisis when the UFT's Albert Shanker agreed to invest union pension funds in municipal bonds, just as the banks were divesting themselves of their own holdings. When they heard the news, Felix Rohatyn and another banker were so overcome with joy that they danced the jig. The bankers were able to implement austerity, not by destroying the unions or by voiding their contract, which, under the Emergency Financial Control Board, they had the legal right to do, but by working through unions, more precisely, by working through the specific interests of labor officials. By agreeing to austerity measures and investing union pension funds in city bonds, labor leaders were able to preserve the form of collective bargaining, but at the price of weakening its substance, that is, labor's power and independent voice. This enabled collective bargaining to function as a vehicle for the implementation of neoliberal measures. And this is crucial. Right? For example, the MLC's 2018 agreement with the city, which was appended to our contracts, requires $600 million in healthcare savings every year, continuing indefinitely. This in exchange for salary increases that barely reach the rate of inflation. A look at the sociology of labor officialdom is useful at this point. Unlike workers who are dependent on employers for their livelihood and can live without unions, labor officials are dependent for their survival on unions as organizations, as institutions. For this unique social layer, the preservation of their roles as mediators of class conflict, as negotiators, as buffers between management and labor is a priority. Agreeing to concessions is one way that leaders attempt to convince management of their usefulness and of the necessity for unions. And unlike union members, leaders set their own salaries and benefits and are not negatively affected by what they negotiate for their members. Labor's power to shape collective bargaining was significantly reduced when its leaders made the fateful strategic decision to cooperate with finance capital. Maintaining this cooperative relation helps to explain why leaders refused Governor Carey's offer to grant unions the right to strike. And more recently, union leaders agreed with Mayor de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo that Cynthia Nixon's proposal of eliminating the no-strike provision from the Taylor Law was not a good idea. Having the legal right to strike might give members the idea that they should actually use it, and striking would rupture labor's or organized labor's relations with the powers that be. The friendly relations between bankers and union leaders have been reported on over decades. That is a reflection of the collaboration between organized labor and capital. Victor Gottbaum, an investment banker, Felix Rohatyn, for example, held joint birthday celebrations in Southampton. The layoff of 13,000 full-time teachers, along with other school employees, did not prevent Albert Shanker from enjoying dinner with a leading banker. Today, the close relations of labor leaders and politicians is yet another expression of this cooperation. DC President Henry Garrido is chummy with the head of the city council, the mayor, and the governor. The successful imposition of austerity and the defeat of labor in what was known as a union town was a momentous shift in the balance of class power that had national repercussions. New York served as a kind of test laboratory for class conflict and demonstrated that what was done here could be done elsewhere. This tectonic shift helped to inaugurate the neoliberal era. In the first form, I pose the following question. Why does the MLC prefer to make concessions on health coverage for union members rather than support the New York Health Act, which would remove health care from the bargaining table and make it a right for all residents of New York State? The MLC's opposition to the New York Health Act has at least two determinants. One is embedded in my question: remove health care from the bargaining table. This would take away an important function from union leaders, shrink their roles, and endanger their raison d'etre. Given the weak salary increases they agree to, healthcare becomes a major selling point and justification for the existence of their unions. The second determinant is that taking healthcare off the market goes against the interests of the corporate elite and the two parties whose neoliberal program involves expanding the market through privatization, not shrinking it through single-payer healthcare. Our labor officials have sacrificed broad class interests for narrow leadership and institutional interests. As mentioned already, during the fiscal crisis, the memberships of public sector unions were not consulted on the decision to cooperate with the banks and not to organize a fight back. For example, a community labor coalition against austerity. But what about union democracy? Democracy should not be limited to the right of members to elect union officers, as important as that is. Rather, members should have the right to have their say, to weigh in on all major questions of policy and strategy. At the very least, there should have been discussions on the fiscal crisis in all delegate assemblies, which are on paper the highest authority in many unions. However, in practice, the DAs, the delegate assemblies, are often bypassed. The political decisions made by leaders are often not presented as such, but are obscured as the only response, as the only possible response to unchangeable realities. This results in a membership that is disenfranchised, depoliticized. Apathy and lack of interest in union affairs become the norm for the majority of members. This, in turn, helps insulate leadership, union leadership, from scrutiny and criticism. Lastly, we need to repoliticize our unions. We need to rebuild the kind of militant minority that existed decades ago. And we can begin that process by challenging the MLC with demands that are understandable and will resonate. Demands for transparency and democracy. What are you negotiating? And we want the right to vote on it. Demands which strike at the very heart of class collaboration. You cannot keep the bedroom door open if you're sleeping with the enemy. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Our next speaker is Nick Bacon. Nick is a high school special education teacher. He serves as a UFT executive board member and is a co-chair of the UFT's New Action Caucus. Take it away, Nick.
Thank you. Nick, you're muted.
Okay, I think I'm sharing my screen now, and I think I'm unmuted now. So my presentation is about what's going on with in-service healthcare negotiations. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about what's going on with the retirees, but for whatever reason, the in-service kind of argument has been getting left out, and I think it's important we look at it. So I'm going to start, here's kind of an outline of my presentation, kind of the reality of what situation we're in, what's going on with in-service negotiations. I'm also going to talk a little bit about welfare funds, which is where a lot of what's happening is happening. And then I'll talk about some notes on democracy and organizing. But I think most of that will come in future presentations from some of the other speakers. So first of all, we have to start with the fact that we kind of have the reality that there's a debt. We owe $600 million in recurring payments. We just do. This is something that we signed. And it's something that's going to, regardless of who's in charge of the unions for the future, it's something we're going to have to deal with. And that's something that's going to become very important when we start talking about in-service negotiations, especially given that the retirees have been somewhat successful so far. Now, we do have these agreements that help protect members as of now. I mean, the one all of us know quite a lot about is the City Administrative Code 12-126, which, of course, signs into law that the city is going to pay the entire cost of health insurance coverage, both for employees and retirees, up to the HIT benchmark. And of course, there's also the 1982 Equalization Agreement, and of course, the Stabilization Fund that kind of comes out of that, where the main insurance that most members, particularly in the UFT, use, GHI CBP, ends up being funded. Of course, at this time, what's happening for a variety of reasons that I won't get into because of the length of time I have today, that fund is not at this time solvent enough to suit its purpose. Okay, and so what's happened is we had that agreement to kind of save that $600 million a year, and for a long time, I mean, it looked like the entire purpose of the Medicare Advantage idea was to fill that kind of gap. In fact, 600 million is the figure that was given for how much savings would come just from Medicare. So switching to Medicare Advantage would have literally been that $600 million. But of course, and this is a good thing, retirees who organized successfully, to this point at least, have stopped that from happening. So for now, those plans are stalled, but now in-service members are even more likely to see as much as $1,250 to $1,750 in premiums. And that's an actual figure that was given by Martin Scheineman in a document in 2022. So actually, that number could be even higher now. It's unclear, and it hasn't happened yet. And we'll get to why that hasn't happened yet in a little bit. But nonetheless, we have to kind of look at what we're looking at here. So this is a piece of what was called the Martin Scheineman Award. It was issued back in 2022. It wasn't actually an award. That's why I have it in quotes in the PowerPoint. It was actually a recommendation. But you see here, this document was kind of drafted. It's about 60 pages long, and you see that I'm just actually going to read it. Although the parties collaborated in good faith to implement plans to save the agreed to $1.1 billion at that time, the city is no longer able to utilize a portion of those savings through the stabilization fund. The $600 million anticipated savings from Medicare Advantage would have helped bridge the gap, but has been severely delayed. The city maintains it's owed over $1 billion and now invokes his jurisdiction under the 2018 agreement, asking for a ruling. So this is the reality. We have this debt. The debt is there whether we like it or not, and something has to happen in order to solve that debt. It's not going to happen with retirees anymore, so it's probably going to happen with in-service. So we've already seen some of these changes happen because there was always going to be, even without the retirees being successful, there was always going to be some level of changes in-service healthcare to make up for some of the savings that were promised. And we've seen a lot of these, particularly in the way of copays. Probably the best example, those of us who have gone to CityMD recently, now costs $100 to go. Back in 2016, it actually only cost $15. At one point, somewhere in the middle, it was about $50, but it went up to $100. Hospital visits were $50. Also, not so long in the recent past, and went up to $150. And when you look at the documents of why those pay increases are there, it's intentionally to kind of change our behaviors, to make it less likely that we go to the hospital, to make it less likely that we go to a CityMD and maybe make an appointment with a primary care physician, or better yet, go on Teladoc or something. You've also seen tiered costs come in. So you've got urgent cares and radiology centers. So you don't have to go to CityMD. There are other ones you can go to. They're kind of few and far between. And they're often, because they're cheaper, they end up being a lot more people there. They take a higher number of insurances. Medicaid, for instance, often the places that you can go to for $50 instead of $100 often take Medicaid and lots of other insurances. So you have longer wait times. So we also see, and this is more of a feeling, I feel like there's not much, there's some places where our data is kind of lacking, but there's a sense that fewer providers are actually taking our insurance. And it is in the documents that one thing that the MLC was trying to do here was to get rid of so-called inefficient providers, aka people who were charging too much. And of course, if they do that, they're getting rid of providers. You're also seeing a lot of what's called ghost networks, and that means you go on your website to look at who takes your insurance, and there's a huge list, and then you actually start calling them, and no one actually takes the insurance. They're just still on this website for whatever reason. That became a big deal with mental health, where it seems that very few people who are actually listed actually take the insurance. Interestingly, this came up recently in the UFT. Some of the laws, for instance, there was one on hospital cost transparency. That was a part of some of the strategies that was being used to lessen the healthcare costs, but it's kind of had these interesting unintended effects. So right now we're dealing with the possibility of Sloan Kettering no longer being a network. And the narrative that was kind of given is once they saw that they were charging less than other hospitals, again, kind of because of these laws, they realized they could charge more. So there's been a lot of already, without changing who our insurer is, we've already seen some major changes in our healthcare. So even with all that, there's an RFP request for proposal meant to save 10%. What they want to do is instead of having GHI CBP, they want to change it to either, you see on the left, this is from a UFT PowerPoint, either some sort of mix of GHI with United Healthcare instead of, I guess, sorry, not Aetna, Blue Cross. So right now we have Anthem Blue Cross for hospitals, and this would take out Blue Cross, and instead we'd be working with United Healthcare. It's also unclear what this version of GHI would look like. Would it be the same, or would it be a version of GHI that's 10%, less, right? Or throw all that away and just have Aetna. So completely go away from GHI, completely go away from Blue Cross, and just have Aetna for everything. How does one actually save 10%? Now, if you listen to what people in UFT leadership are saying, it's that anything they agree to is going to somehow be better, even if they do save 10%. Realistically, if you're saving 10%, you're going to have to do the same sort of stuff they've already been doing to make healthcare cheaper. For instance, increasing copays, cover fewer services, have more prior authorizations, have more tiered networks, more tiered services, fewer providers, right? Get rid of those so-called inefficient providers and maybe establish more of these sort of ghost networks where people are listed as taking our insurance, but you go there and they don't actually want to take it. And of course, premiums. Remember, previously the estimate was between $1,250 and $1,750 a year in premiums, which is a lot for some people in some of our unions. In the UFT, for instance, paraprofessionals, that's a huge amount of money. And that's true for other people in other unions who this would affect. Now, interestingly, negotiations have broken down. This comes from a UFT email that was sent out to I think all members, possibly just chapter leaders, just that healthcare negotiations are stalled. And this is interesting because they've broken down, but they aren't over. So people aren't talking. If we were speaking last year, people assumed that the big changes in our healthcare were going to happen by summer, and then nothing happened. But again, I was going to go back to the beginning of my presentation. The debt is still there. So the healthcare negotiations are stalled, but they're still kind of happening. So I'll just pause on that. But and what you're hearing from UFT is they're stalled because of just all the craziness at City Hall. I don't know how accurate that is an assessment, but for whatever reason, healthcare negotiations are stalled. But you have to remember that debt is still there. So the other thing here we have to look at is there's these welfare funds. And this is actually part of that agreement. I'm just showing a very small section of the agreement where the $600 million in recurring savings came from. And it also says here, the parties agree that the welfare refunds will receive $200 per member one-time lump sum payments funded by joint stabilization fund payable effective July 1st, yada, yada, yada. In other words, the welfare funds are part of the agreement. Okay, so it wasn't just that we were giving back money to the city. There was also this narrative, and you see this a lot with the leadership of some of the unions who have supported this agreement, that at least the welfare funds will be getting money. And the welfare funds are important because they cover things like in the UFT, for instance, they cover prescriptions, they cover optical, they cover hearing, they cover dental. So part of the idea here is putting more money inside of these other parts for healthcare that aren't actually covered by, say, GHI or by HIP or whatever primary insurance we're using. Interestingly, and this has been a big debate here in the UFT, and again, we all have different welfare funds. So what I'm talking about right now doesn't apply in the same way to PSC or some of the other unions who are here. But this is a graph. The source is at the bottom. This comes from a person named Ronnie Almonte, who's also in the UFT and works with me on the executive board. But you can see the amount of money in our welfare fund has dramatically increased. But the other part here is we're not actually doing all that much with that money. And so our dental has been a huge source of debate over the past couple of years because it's not as effective as it needs to be. The payments we're giving to dentists are so low that I've seen it compared to Medicaid as being worse than Medicaid for dentists. And so fewer and fewer providers are taking it, and we're finding that we have to pay more and more out of pocket to pay for things. But even though we've got all this money in our welfare fund, for whatever reason, we're not reinvesting it. So there is a new RFP, but we know very little about it.
Excuse me, Nick, could you begin to wrap it up?
Yes, I'm wrapping up now. So, and one reason we have so little information is there's this false promise of member input. Because really what happens is the UFT is massive. We have elementary, middle, high school retirees, but there's no differentiation of that when we go to votes. So basically it's Mulgrew, wherever he's appointed, who's making the votes, and we don't get any vote ourselves. There was a healthcare negotiation committee that was established, but they've kept known critics out, like me, for instance. So I'm one of 102 people who have executive decision-making power at the UFT, and I applied to be on this committee, and of course I was kept out. And no one I know who's in these alternative parties have been allowed in either, to my knowledge. I'm gonna wrap up there. I had one more slide, but it's about organizing, and I think that's going to come up anyway. So I will stop here.
Thank you, Nick. That was very, very helpful and very important to get the in-service folks in this as well. Our next speaker is Sean Petty. And Sean is a pediatric emergency room nurse at Health and Hospitals Jacobi in the Bronx, the president of NYSNA at Jacobi, and member of the negotiations committee of NYSNA Health and Hospitals. Okay, take it away, Sean.
Thanks, John. I was asked to talk about the contract campaign that we were able to organize in the last round of negotiations. I think to start, it's important to understand where we started from, which is that prior to this last contract fight, there had been exactly zero what I would call actual genuine contract campaigns in our union in the public sector. Could be ever, but certainly in the last 30 to 40 years, and certainly in the last 17 years that I've been a part of the union. There was a wildcat partial couple hospital strike in 1980 that I think made equivocal gains. But besides that, we have basically in the public sector been engaged in very just at the table pro forma bargaining, collective begging, some people like to call it, where you're not actually adding any sort of pressure or trying to fight for anything really above and beyond the citywide pattern that's been established by larger unions. So leading into this contract fight, a number of us, I think, realized that if we were going, especially once the pattern was established, realized that our system and the backbone of the public healthcare system, and I'm a pediatric emergency nurse, at Jacobi, and I, public health was in jeopardy. So the situation for us was that we had lost, or leading up to COVID and after COVID, almost 40% of our full-time nurses. We were down to below 7,000 nurses, about 6,500 nurses, whereas we needed to be over 10,000 and had been over 10,000 nurses historically. And so we were relying on extremely expensive agency staff to fill the gaps, but it was a downward spiral and we were in a serious crisis. And that parity raises were not, pattern raises were going to exacerbate the crisis. We would simply not be able to retain any staff, as had been the case for an escalating way. So some of us began to organize. First, we did some preparatory actions. They took away our enhanced overtime that some of us had gotten, which created some semblance of stability with some of our nurses, kept some of the work inside of the hospital system. Agency nurses, by the way, during COVID were making, in some cases, 2, in some cases 3 times, like actual times of the salary of a public hospital nurse. So we were hemorrhaging people. People were like, I'm not doing this for essentially what the third of what I could be making as an agency nurse. somewhere else, or half of what I could be making. So we were hemorrhaging people, enhanced overtime, sort of stabilized some elements of that a little bit, and then they took that away. And so that was the first kind of jolt that I think got some people together, and we organized a fight. We actually did a little bit of an occupation of their offices with about 15 of us. This is a year and a half before the contract expired. That helped us build a slate. And in our union, we have a somewhat democratic process for our negotiations committee. And the negotiations committee actually is comprised of rank and file members and does actually make the important decisions about the contract. So in that sense, we are somewhat exceptional among public sector unions. We organized a slate and through some of these previous actions and some of our previous rank and file work, and we won. And we won primarily because we were some of the more known militants, and people knew that it was going to take an aggressive approach in this contract to actually win what we needed. But I think we won mainly because I think we came up with the central demand, which is a pretty radical demand given where we were at. Our base salaries were not compared to agency salaries, but compared to other nurses, other full-time nurses in the private sector, we're anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 difference between the public and the private sector. So the demand that we hung our hat on, that we said was non-negotiable and that we were going to fight for, is pay parity with the private sector. And that turned out to be the right issue, not just to win the election, but we knew that was going to be the right issue to organize the entire campaign around. Because it was the only thing that was really going to save the public sector and stabilize hiring and retention, and not just stabilize, actually make it happen, to get back the 30 to 40% of the nurses that we had lost, but also to retain some of them once we got them back. So we framed it as a fight for the existence of public health care. And we very explicitly framed that fight as needing to have pay parity in order to achieve that. And I think neither one of those were hyperbole. I think those were very true. And I think everybody felt that in a very visceral way. Another sort of organizing principles that we sort of organized the contract campaign around, which is, again, the first time, once we won the negotiating committee, we were able to work with some of the more talented and principled staff members in NYSNA to actually organize a real contract campaign. And that meant having a strategy of escalating actions, meaning that you start with what people are willing to do in a given moment. And then if that doesn't work, then you escalate into something more aggressive and bigger. And if that doesn't work, you keep going and you keep going until you win. That it's not just, you're just doing what you can up until a certain day, and then whatever you get, you get. You have a demand, you're dead set on winning it, and then you escalate to whatever means necessary it's going to take until you win it. So we did have that approach. Now, did everybody fully agree with that approach, the come hell or high water, by any means necessary? No, I wouldn't say that everybody did. And we actually, we also faced retaliation from our employer and within our union among some members of our negotiating committee. We lost some members of our negotiating committee through direct employer attacks on their employment status. And it was a constant battle to maintain the integrity of some of those strategic principles, what I would call the left of our negotiating committee. And the left was smaller within the negotiating committee by the end of it than it was at the beginning, and that turned out to have an impact in terms of how things played out. But it suffices to say that we did implement a strategy of escalating actions, and that was generally agreed upon. We also won agreement amongst the negotiating committee and amongst NYSNA staff of open negotiations. and that also turned out to be pretty important. We were starting from scratch. The hospitals, beyond a couple places, had very little infrastructure in terms of our experience organizing any actions. So we had to start small. We started with a press conference at City Hall in November. Then we had a citywide action down at Health and Hospitals offices in Wall Street in the financial district. The following Valentine's Day in February. That action was very energetic, we bussed people from, had several hundred nurses, many of whom had first time they had done actions. But was it was very different than any other NYSNA action that I have been a part of. The energy level, the militancy, there was even spontaneous talk of us taking the lobby during that action. Of the H&H offices. It was ultimately decided that we didn't have enough forces or enough agreement to be able to do that. But the fact that it was even an open question during a NYSNA action that we would decide to occupy the lobby was a huge step forward for us. The city was stonewalling us at the table around parity. They wouldn't discuss economics, so we bargained at the table for all of the other issues. They kept stalling on the economic question. And there were a whole range of debates. We had argued, the left of the committee had argued pretty consistently that we pretty much knew we would have to escalate into direct action civil disobedience at the very least in order to win our demands. And I think we won the kind of center of the committee for a while. The more conservative elements of the committee, which also incorporated the more conservative elements of NYSNA staff, were silent about it. Turns out they very much disagreed with it, but didn't say so for a good number of the good number of the debates that we had on the negotiating committee about it. So we had kind of assumed that we were at the process of working towards direct action civil disobedience. And we set a deadline of June 1st for the city to meet our demand for parity, or we would, in our own words, dramatically escalate our campaign to fight to win this demand. And we said that at the table, we said that to our own members, and we said it for time after time for a good month leading up to June 1st. June 1st came and went, and the city said nothing. And so we decided to plan our first major, what we called our escalated action. That's when the real debates about civil disobedience began. And that's when the real disagreements came out about civil disobedience among the negotiating committee. And ultimately, we didn't win those debates outright, but we won that debate ultimately on the street in a certain kind of a way. We did mobilize an all-out way for the Bellevue action in early June, which I believe I can maybe get a little couple minutes to give you guys a sense of that action here. Can everybody?
Sean, can you, excuse me, can you begin to wrap it up? I don't want to cut this out.
Okay. I'll wrap it up with this 1 minute of this action then. Can people see?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll turn the sound on. So this is after an hour rally where we had speakers, we had some members inside the lobby and some members on the outside. And then the members on the inside sort of joined the outside rally at a certain point because we were threatened. But now we decided on the ground, we didn't decide this ahead of time, we decided on the ground to try to take the lobby again. Wow. We were met immediately, obviously, with some violence by the hospital police. This really galvanized people on the ground.
You can't see this on screen, but what's happening is that some of us, after getting shoved, moved off to the right of the screen and found an open door that security had fled from and started letting members into the lobby, basically on one of the doors to the right of your screen. You can kind of see it now a little bit. There's members kind of filtering into the side on the very right-hand side of the screen. This aggression sort of led to an escalation in action, which in the last little bit, I'll show right now, it's about 30 more seconds. But we continue to try to get more members in and challenge the security's barrier, what we conceived of as a barrier between us and our patients. We are nurses in H&H, we're nurses at Bellevue, and they were preventing us from telling our patients about what was happening.
Is that it, Sean?
Give me 20 more seconds. There's something.
Sure. Sure.
From mind you, we're city nurses. Nobody at all in this rally has ever done anything like this. Has ever confronted police, has never confronted our own hospital police, has ever engaged in anything like this action. We affectionately named this barricade later "Bury the Barricade," and Barry had a sad ending. Okay. And the last little image of us cheering in the background after we defeated hospital police. So that set the tone for what eventually. I mean, I can talk later about what happened after that action and how we were able to. The city ultimately caved, and we won the largest municipal raise in public sector union history. 18% in the first year, 35% over 5 years, and broke the city pattern. And so but there's a lot of details in between that and a lot of not so great things that happened in the meantime. But that gives a sense of what generally we were able to accomplish.
Okay, thank you, Sean, and congratulations.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Michelle Keller. Michelle is DC 37 Retirees Association Local 375 member and activist, former vice president of the Civil Service Technical Guild, president emeritus of New York City Coalition of Labor Union Women, district leader, Peekskill Democratic City Party, and director of New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. So we're looking forward to hearing Michelle.
So thank you, John, and good afternoon to all of you, and I'm glad to be here with you today. I've been active in the union for almost 50 years now, given the fact that I've retired as of last August, coming in last August, almost 50 years, because what I've done is now I've combined my union services and help with membership with my community. And as you can see, that too, we must really talk about, not to leave anyone behind. It's better in the union. There's no question about it. Freedom, fairness, and dignity. You've heard about the myriad of services that I have. There's plenty more, but it was those duties or those specific how should I say, those titlings is what I'm thinking about that really converge with a lot of the work that I do on the street at this time. We say that we who believe in freedom cannot rest. Ella Baker said that. She's a scholar and a civil rights leader. The union, you and I, we're always doing something. It is the power of the union collective that improves our wages, provides for better benefits, promotes equity, improves working conditions, and ensures for a retirement of dignity. Fact, union workers have greater access to all of the freedoms and the values we empower. Our shop floor and where we bind in community. So the thoughtful question for the next generation of labor leadership is, are you ready to take on the risk of change? Things at work and within the system of the union to get into some good trouble. Are we demanding change, respect, and flexibility? Organizing and mobilizing is the effort of bringing others or like minds together just to do something. And where do we hear that most recently? Just to do something. Collectively, we build up the strength in numbers that threaten and draw to an end the power of just the precious few. We believe that any action is better than just grumbling. We believe that all problems have a mutual resolution. Mutual. We believe that a solution demands a group activity since all of our future success is at stake. We believe that strength is in the numbers and choice gives us hope. Our members so often get labeled as apathetic, but this is not true. Everyone cares about something at work. Everyone wants to belong to something. We must give our members purpose and a rite of passage to change things, to connect their needs to the greater power source. We want to win campaigns by planning, strategizing, and sharing a decent amount of the less glamorizing work that more hands make light work, as history has proven. We can and will move our members by example with one-on-one conversations, moving from the disengaged to the supportive, from the supportive to the active, from the active to assuming the core responsibilities of our movement with a confidence. There is no pre-written script. The power of a system begs the fairness of assuming the core responsibilities of the movement with a confidence. The change of a system begs the fairness of a radical change, dictating the need for our membership to do the following: to organize the unorganized, to significantly involve our sisters in all places of political action and legislation, to build in coalitions, to demand equitable and affirmative action in the workplace, to increase the participation of women in all parts of their unions. We must develop and cultivate and accept a movement of movement-centered leaders, not leader-centered movements. It has been more urgent to rebuild a militant labor movement capable of resisting empty promises for all of us. Start small, but start right now. Thank you so very, very much.
Thank you, Michelle, and it's a big help, and as always, an inspiration. Our final speaker is Olivia Swisher. Olivia is a middle school art teacher and UFT chapter leader at Middle School 821. She's a Moore Movement rank and file caucus member and served on the UFT negotiating committee in the last round of negotiations. So take it away, Olivia.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And thank you to the organizers of this meeting. And thank you, Michelle. You just got me fired up. I really appreciated everything that everyone has said so far. So I'm here today to talk specifically about what's more is doing, how we organize, and specifically around the contract, and can even touch a little bit about like how we relate to the MLC, and these big questions that we're bringing up today. When John began, I wrote down one of John's questions, which was, how can we build a rank and file movement that is on the offensive, militant, and disciplined? And I'm here to say today that for me, in my experience, more is doing that. More is the movement of rank and file educators, the caucus that I'm a part of within the UFT. We are on the offensive, we are militant, and we are disciplined. We have shared principles and a shared organizing strategy that I think Michelle was just even highlighting too, which is for us, the Labor Notes Secrets of a Successful Organizer strategy, where we're constantly thinking about organizing our members and how we can bring them into the core of our work. Sean talked about escalating actions with organizing. We refer to this as the campaign mountain. And I bring up why we use a specific strategy, because we have over 500 in-service members. And having a shared strategy means that we have a common language for winning. And we do win. So we're a part of, we're a caucus within a larger group of caucuses that work on a national level called UCOR. They're United Caucuses of Rank and File Educators, and we fall under Labor Notes, incredible rank and file organization that many of us are familiar with. But if you're not, please look them up. So we are not just more within the UFT, we're more a sibling to our national caucuses of educators around the country, which is going to be really important in the next couple of years. It already is very important, but we have to be real about the threats of public education. So we meet yearly with our UCOR siblings, and that is where we get a lot of our energy and our organizing strategies from. We also have monthly meetings with our UCOR siblings. Now, with regards to the most recent contract, myself and Nick, who presented earlier, we were both in-service rank and file members on the open negotiations committee. And it was so open, they had 500 in-service members sign an NDA to say that whatever we were doing within negotiations, we could not speak to members about. For us as more members, this was pretty challenging, actually. We had a lot of conversation about whether or not it was a part of our principles to even sign an NDA. Ultimately, we settled that it was important for more members to be in that space, and there were about 14 of us within that space. We pushed from within, and I will say that we actually forced the UFT to a semblance of a contract fight. Myself and another more member spoke with one of the staffers from the UFT who, we knew we might be able to move a little bit. And we suggested the idea of contract action teams. I learned that specifically when going to Labor Notes, hearing how it worked in other unions across the country, which, we have to have these conversations together because we learn from each other. So we came back, we brought up having contract action teams, and we pushed for it within the union spaces, and we actually won it. And so even though Michael Mulgrew knows who we are, he knows we're more members, he likes one of us, he doesn't like me. We had a contract team. What this means though for us within more is that it gave us the green light to basically organize like hell. So there were union UFT sanctioned organizing events that, were things like picket at your school. And I believe our contract demands were like the demands that we could say publicly were like respect, time, and something else, like very generic. It was really silly, but I've like blacked it out at this point. But we felt like, okay, well, we have the green light to really organize, especially oftentimes we've like gotten, screamed at for organizing within the union, and we still organize anyways. That's important to say. So what we did is like an inside outside approach. We moved within those union spaces. We asked questions. We were critical. We put our necks out on the line within those union spaces, but we also organized on the outside. And we used our militant approach rooted in our labor note strategy to basically do escalating actions. And so we had two campaign mountains that we were working with. One was our UFT inward campaign mountain, what we were doing within the UFT, and what were we doing outside of the UFT. And really, I would say one of our best actions that we did was on May Day. We knew the UFT would never touch May Day. Why would a neoliberal leadership touch May Day? But we can and we will. And so we organized a major cross-sector contract, confrontation with the mayor at Cipriani's, where he was receiving a literacy award, which is hilarious. And we had a lot of people who were on this call here today actually show up and picket outside. And one of the things that I just want to share is that a lot of our actions that we did both inside the union and outside, one of our main organizing strategies was that a lot of our union members and our union siblings, they're angry, they were fired up. We had just taught through COVID. It was bad, and it's still bad. We had righteous anger, but a lot of our members hadn't fought like that kind of fight before. And so back to what Sean was saying, we needed escalating actions. We needed ways to bring people in to show, what does it feel like when you come together and you say, I'm not taking this shit anymore, pardon my French. And what does it feel like to stand together and come into a mass? We also suggested and got approval, we did it, like these mass citywide grade-ins. That whole thing where we basically took to the streets to show the public how much work we do outside of work, which is a lot. It's a tremendous amount. We did it in the streets. And in Brooklyn, our More field team organized one at Barclays Center. We took over the entire walkway area. People had to walk through us. And they're like, what the hell are these teachers doing? Oh, we're grading. And this is why. And here's, a glimpse into our work. But part of our central tenet, especially with organizing at that time, was this idea of joyful militancy. That if we're going to bring people in and if we're going to have them confront the boss or confront the public about our work, we have to make it fun. Because we have to build a movement, right? We're not just showing up and wearing blue. We're showing up and we're building a compassionate, loving union membership, which is not what our union leaders want us to have. They want us to stay separate. So for us within More, this idea of joyful militancy, which I got from my professor, my CUNY professor, I want to shout out the professors here for CUNY. Sophia recommended this book and a couple of us read it and we were like, okay, yeah, that's what we need to do. We don't need to be bogged down on the negative. We need to raise up and project a different vision for how we want things to be. Ultimately, I want to say, because I think I'm coming up on my time and I have so many scattered notes, but I want to say that our contract fight in the end was a win, even though the contract passed and it was, it's not a great contract. For the first time in a number of years, and I bet Nick remembers how many years, but in a number of years, 25% of our union members voted no. It had always been marginal that a few people would vote no. A quarter of our members voted no. It was a trash contract, but it was also the raising of consciousness for people to say, I can vote no. I don't have to accept this. And it, honestly, what we've seen is it kind of put a fire under the union leadership's butt. And then at the same time, they're having to work with our retirees who just had a massive win. Shout out to our retirees. And they're starting to come under fire over and over and over again. That the status quo is no longer working anymore. And I just want to end with saying that, yes, there is the MLC. Yes, there is pattern bargaining. What we've learned from NYSNA is we can reject that. What we believe in more is, yes, those things can exist, but it does not dictate what we do and how we build power. We are the ones who choose how we build power. And ultimately, if you have shared principles, discipline, and an organizing strategy, I really believe there's nothing that we can't do. And we've seen just in this forum and across the city what organizing is able to do when we're confronting the ruling class of not only our union leadership, the MLC and the mayor. But when we come together in those ways, we really do win. And that's why we say when we fight, we win. Even if it's a small fight. I want to end with what Michelle said. Even if you're starting small, start small. You will win if you keep at that fight and you're organized and disciplined. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Olivia. That was terrific, and really glad you're with us today. So now we move into opening it up to the folks who are participating from a distance. I guess as we all are. But in any case, the framework or the format would be we're establishing a queue, and we'll try to reach as many people as possible. We ask people to be very disciplined in relation to that, and not go beyond the 3-minute time they are allotting to each speaker. At the end of 2 minutes, I'll give a 1-minute heads up, and I ask you to wrap things up so we can get as many voices and perspectives in as possible. So, Boyda, do you have anything on a cue to who we start off with?
Yeah, thanks. By the way, just a reminder, we are recording. And I think we agreed that we're going to record the Q&A as well. I've been saving some of the questions that have popped up in chat. We probably don't want to go through all of them, but I could start us off by, reading 1 or 2 out loud, unless we want to go to hands.
Why don't you take a couple from the chat and then go to the hands?
Yeah, so folks can just raise hands, and I'll keep a list of stack. So someone asked a long time ago, now an hour ago, does anyone know whether MLC has in-person meetings, and if so, where? I think some of that was addressed in our first forum, but definitely worth revisiting that question. And then someone, Mike Kluger, asked a couple times, does the MLC still have enough votes to accept the mayor's plan to reforce retirees into the Medicare Advantage now that Mulgrew has supposedly withdrawn the UFT's support? So just a question about the impact of that action of withdrawing UFT supports. Someone asked, I didn't know if they were if it was a real question, but it did sort of make me chuckle. I wonder how Henry Guido is connected to the corruption of the Adams administration. So those are 3 questions that maybe any of the speakers might want to address to start us off.
As far as I know, the meetings of the MLC are not open to the public, and I don't know anything else, anything more about how they function. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we want to eventually get to, is to have a better understanding of their structure and their practices. Right now, I don't know when and I think just the presidents of the local unions participate in the meetings.
Can I comment on that?
Sure, go ahead, Len.
Yeah, let me get so I'm visible. Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on that.
Len, would you identify yourself?
Yeah. I'm Len Rodberg. I taught at Queens College, and I'm in the PSC CUNY and the Social Safety Net Working Group, which is the activist center of our work. We've talked about the undemocratic character of the MLC, in the sense that the members of the unions are not made aware of what's going on. I want to stress that it's far worse than that. The presidents of unions that might have a differing view about how the MLC should function are also kept in the dark. The president of my union simply does not know what is going on within the MLC, because it's kept so tightly within the leaders that we know of, and that have been vilified enough over the last 3 or 4 years for us to all have their names. There's Harry and Henry and Michael. Anyway, I just wanted to stress that, how the whole structure of the MLC has to be different than it is now.
Thank you, Len. Boyd, do you have somebody, or hands? If you want to speak, please put your hand up or, okay, I just saw Janet Bash. Go ahead, Janet. Yeah, unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I belong to two locals. One of them is DC 37 Local 508. And I'm a retiree UFT. And my husband's retired New York Fire Department. And I just want to say about, someone spoke about, unified medical care for all. And what I noticed is the welfare funds are vastly different. I had to get a prescription in the summertime and I went to the pharmacist, and I know this is years ago, many, many years ago. And under the UFT, it was $2 copay. Under DC 37, it was going to be $112. And then the fire department was still higher than the UFT. And I said, well, I'm going to use my UFT benefit. And I just thought, is there any way, and these welfare funds, do we pay into them? And, or could there be more parity for all union members so that if someone from DC 37 needed medicine, that it would be similar in price to somebody else in another union?
I think I could answer that.
Go ahead, Nick.
I know in the UFT, there's a big they're against that. I should say the people in power in the UFT are against sharing welfare funds as kind of the equivalent of what you're talking about. And one reason is that they view the UFT as having the best welfare fund. And they've actually criticized specifically PSCs in delegate assemblies because it's come up, it's been very controversial in our union that our dental is just so bad. And so the narrative right now is, well, yeah, the dental, we don't prioritize as much as prescriptions, which you kind of just mentioned, the questioner, because our prescription benefits do turn out to be a bit better than other welfare funds, because that's the prioritization in the UFT. So again, our dental is worse apparently than PSCs, but our prescriptions tend to be a bit better. There's also some debate, and I'm actually not going to suggest, I don't want to suggest that this is exactly what I believe, but there's been some criticism that maybe one reason people don't want to give up the welfare funds, the power over the welfare funds in these unions, because that's a big way they get to, especially post-Janus, it's a big way they get to say, hey, union members, this is what we're doing for you. We just got you this drug, for instance, or we just got you this new prescription benefit, this new whatever. And again, because there are such different ways that different welfare funds prioritize their benefits, I think that's another reason why people are very hesitant to give up their power over this in union leaderships.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
The last thing though is, yeah, it probably would save money because you'd be able to consolidate a lot of wherever decision making is made. Might be able to reduce the number of people employed, which has other ramifications. But you see my point. Consolidation could probably save money and make and solve some of these problems we have with healthcare funding. But again, I think the likelihood of unions agreeing to that is quite low.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Nick. I see three hands up now. Antonia, Manuela, Peter Pacheco, and Robert Cowan.
Yeah. So can I ask that someone, I was going to go to the stack, Antonia, after. Can someone answer the question about the Medicare Advantage and Mulgrew withdrawing UFT support? Or does anyone have thoughts about that one that came up?
I could, but I just spoke. I don't know if someone else wants to take it.
I don't know what would happen if he came to a vote now. I don't know whether he would just abstain and not, have the UFT votes counted, or whether he would, follow up on what he said, that he's not supporting it. I don't think anyone knows actually what he would do.
I would just add, we don't know what we do. We do know that, after this is all kind of blown up, he said he's against it. And I want to be clear. I don't think he said he's against Medicare Advantage, period. I think he's been pretty clear that he means this specific plan. And it could be that another Medicare Advantage plan comes out, a revised version, and all of a sudden he reverses his position. We know that when it counted, when there was actually a vote as to whether to go to this Medicare Advantage plan, plenty of unions voted against it, but UFT had a high weighted vote. And because it had such a high weighted vote, and so reduced to 37, it was easy for that decision to be made. So, because of UFT's weight, that does make a difference, but it doesn't have enough weight that it could completely overtake that vote. And I just want to reiterate, it looks like healthcare negotiations are stalled. I mean,
okay, Nick, we have a lineup of a lot of people I want to get. Okay, Antonia, would you go next?
Yes. Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about everybody.
All right. My name is Antonia Manuela, and I am a member of the original Retirees Association of DC 37. Right now, it has been usurped, as I would like to call it, and it is a different story. I am supporting the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees, who is in alliance with many other retiree organizations and other warriors that I call labor warriors. More than 3 years, we have been fighting to keep our traditional Medicare. 10 cases that we have won, and they have all been appealed by our mayor. Okay. And right now, our leader, Garrido, okay, which is part of the MLC, Mulgrew, Nespoli, who has started this campaign to get rid of our traditional Medicare and replace it with Medicare Advantage. Okay, we have been fighting with various groups throughout the nation. We want this to be known, you see, and that is their tool. Total lack of transparency. That's how this fight began, with a whistleblower that said, this is happening. You are going to be usurped into the Medicare Advantage plan. And no one knew anything about it. Well, all hell broke loose. Like good union members, good retired union members, we hit the streets. And we said, no, this is not going to happen. We hit city council, the courts, the organizations that were for the Medicare Advantage. And so finally, there had to be a stop to this. When we were in the courts, we always won. We showed up. We showed up like good union members, because a retired union member is still a union member. This is what it comes down to. After you have worked for the city all your life, they are going to take away our right to decide for ourselves our health care. This is why we have to be, and I'm talking in specifics. Everyone is talking, about, we should have been fine. I am speaking about specifics. We have to get legislation to get our retirees onto that bargaining table of the MLC. We've got to do that. And we've got to keep after our lawmakers to get legislation, unfair legislation, that weakens the power of the retiree, of elders. All right? We are going to see what's going to happen in the courts with our support going to Albany on the 19th. A busload of us are going. The thing is that I thought I would be relaxing. No, justice never rests. And every once in a while, you have to wake it up. All right? So I'm going to put, a stop right now. And everyone, I think we're on the right road. We have to fight legislatively. We have to fight our own union bosses many times. Not only our regular work boss, we have to sometimes fight our union bosses. Because until we internalize that we are the union, every single individual is the union, we're not going to win. We have to internalize that before we start fighting. And share information, for God's sake. Let's not just all be, well, this group is for that union's for that, blah, blah, blah. We're thinking the same way. How about joining the fight? the same way, in the same with the same passion. And that is one thing, to get our power, our deciding power, into the healthcare that affects us and that will affect our dear ones and that will affect the future. Right now, the actives, you're on the right track, but you've got to understand the whole picture. And we want a better unification with the retirees and the actives. They're trying to keep us apart in every single way.
And it's really good stuff. We need to get.
Go, Antonia. Go for it. Yes.
Peter Pacheco.
Yeah.
Hi, so I'm a staff nurse at the Health and Hospitals policy, and I was also on the negotiation committee, and I really think that what all of labor in New York need to do right now is hone in and focus on the passage of the New York Health Act. Tune everything else out. Concentrate on that. The differences in dental benefits for the different contracts would be gone, right? The New York Health Act is a bipartisan issue. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats wanted to pass, apparently. So this is something that I believe very strongly that we should do. I think it's a winning issue. I think it's, I'm sorry that there's not more leadership from NYSNA on this call, because I think that would have been really helpful. But I think that's really what we need to concentrate on.
Peter, that's a big idea, throughout all our work. Robert Cowan is the next person.
Hi, yes, I'm Robert Cowan, PSC retiree, formerly taught at Queens College. There's a lot of energy I see in this conference, and I think we should devote a significant portion of our energy and our strength to getting involved in the political arena. In particular, we'd like to get rid of Mayor Eric Adams, who's really no friend of ours. There is a primary coming up in June 2025 for the Democratic nominee for mayor. And I think that we should vet other candidates and see who mostly aligns with our interest, and then support that person vocally and with all our strength. I mean, we have like 250,000 retirees. That should count for something. And we can make ourselves a political force in the city. I think we should do that and go beyond our fights with the unions, et cetera, because our union leadership, for the most part, won't participate for our interests. So we have to fight for our own interests. And therefore, I urge everybody to think about getting involved in the upcoming mayoralty primary. Let's get rid of Eric Adams, the one who called Medicare Advantage a bait and switch when he wanted to get votes. And then as soon as he became mayor, he switched. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Robert. Matt Shapiro.
I'm a UFT retired teachers chapter member, and I just wanted to respond to the question about Mr. Mulgrew and what his recent statements mean. They mean nothing. Mulgrew basically lost the retired teachers chapter election, and because of that, he's been making nice noises that don't mean a thing. He's against Medicare Advantage. No, he's not. He proposed it. This was his big thing. If he really meant any of the things that he was saying that he has been saying he would support Intro 1096. That's put forth by well, I don't remember the name of the Marte. I think the councilwoman, councilman. He doesn't. He opposes it. He would support the 3 major lawsuits against the reduction in our benefits. He doesn't. He opposes them. He refuses to support them. He's a liar. Nothing he can say, nothing he says can be trusted. The only thing we need to do with Mulgrew is replace him. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Dave Kotelchuk?
I'm
David Kotelchuk?
Dave, right. Can you hear me? Okay. Dave Kotelchuk, PSC retiree and member of the Social Safety Net Committee. What I'd like to, we're looking to make major changes in the MLC, all kinds of changes. I'd like to know if someone could answer for me the question, what is it that locks our union or all the other locals into the MLC? Was there an agreement by past labor leaders of our union to join and that locks us in? Can we change our mind? And also other unions. Did you agree to come in, or did we just get appointed by the mayor and just start cooperating, right? Which doesn't bind us by law or by statute. So I'd like to know, I'd like to have that question answered. Are we locked in, and how are we locked in? Could anybody answer that? Would anybody like to try to answer that?
Please raise your hand if you want to answer that particular question. I don't know the answer myself.
Like Mike
Frank has raised his hand.
Okay.
Not a full answer, Dave, but a brief answer. There are some unions that do not belong to the MLC. They're public sector unions. I spoke to the president of the Plumbers Union, DC 37, and he said, no, we would never join that thing. We don't want to give up our rights, right to vote. So it is not, as far as I know, it is not obligatory. Therefore, the question needs to be put to our leadership. All right, why are we there? And that discussion needs to happen in our union and other unions too, that why are we in the MLC? What are the advantages, if there are any, right? And what are the disadvantages? That needs to be an open public discussion within our union.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Michael Lynch.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Lynch. I'm a UFT retiree. I'm also a proud delegate for the Retiree Advocate and a member of the New Action Caucus of the UFT. So I'm very glad to be here today. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot from each speaker. And one of the things I want to say, and I feel even more strongly about now, and since, well, I agree with Peter Pacheco, I believe you pronounce it, Peter Pacheco, and how important the New York Healthcare Act is, or Health Act is. And especially with our national presidential result, I think it's even so much more important now than ever. And that's what I really wanted to say. And as I understand it, when it was up in Albany last year, it was close to being, well, it was very widely supported, and it was close. And the main opposition came from union leadership. Union leadership was the main opposition. So if somebody wants to speak on that, please do, and how much they really killed it. And we can't let that happen again this year. So I really, it really gets me mad that our union leadership and how we as all unions can really advocate and demand that our leadership, which I believe the retiree advocate is doing, and we can do better, but demand our leadership support the New York Health Act. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael Stein. Michael Stein?
Yeah, I didn't have my hand raised, but I've been putting into the chat specifically around the New York Health Act as well, which I fully support. But I think it's important for all of us here to realize that, as far as I know at the present time, one of the problems with it and one of the rationales that the unions have been using to refuse to support it is that it doesn't include out-of-state retirees. And that's something that you need to realize. It can be fixed. It needs to be fixed. That's my only point of information.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Michael. Amy Shu.
I didn't have my hand up, John.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Evie Rich.
It looks like, John, that Mike Kluger is next.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Evie, Evie, would you go, and then I'll get to Matt. Was it Evie? Are you there? Okay, I'll go to Matt and Matt Kruger, and then if someone else, if Evie comes back in, we'll go there. And I see Roberta on the list also. Okay, Mr. Kruger.
Hi, Mike Kluger.
Hi,
I'm a local 375 DC 37 retiree, and I have a comment regarding membership retaking power. And Michelle, since you're DC 37 as well, maybe you could speak to this. DC 37 has a very large voice in the MLC, but the problem that I see with DC 37 is that the members do not have the ability to elect the executive director. That's done by the delegate assembly. And unfortunately, since retirees don't have any votes within DC 37, this is something that would need to be addressed by the active membership rather than by the retirees. But I'm wondering what the process would be to change that so that the executive director of DC 37 does get elected directly by the membership.
Thank you.
Elected,
go ahead.
Elected directly by the membership, they would have to change. Well, that's a one member, one vote. So there has to be some adjustment to the Constitution. You see, now folks can come in with a president can come in with a list of folks, and that's how the executive, that's how Henry stays at the top, because you don't have one man, one vote. You don't. That's all of that, that shimmying that's going on before people come in and vote. You understand that, that. But I think we need to go back to what Antonio was speaking about before, the recognition that we're all in this together. We keep talking about retirees, and we're talking about this is what I was going to say, and our active members. There's not even a dignity for retirees anymore. See, retirees are always on. When I was talking, I explained that to you. What we do need to do is work in coalitions. We have to look for other groups. And we have done that with the retirees at this time. Not only did we wake up to our own, what was going on, but we started to spread this out. So we become a voice to so many other folks that don't even know that this is happening. We were fortunate because someone woke up, but this is still happening to today. And as we go around, we must be, each and every one of us must be. We must educate what will ultimately be the new leadership. That's the workers that are now. And we must educate the folks that were around every day in our own neighborhoods. Folks don't even know this is going on, but they're grateful after you educate them. That's the only way this is going to happen.
Michelle, what would be the process for changing the Constitution to allow direct election of the executive director?
That would have to happen within the system, with those folks that are there now. They would have to come to a reckoning. Those delegates would have to come to a reckoning. It has to be one man, one vote.
Which they won't do because that would mean they're giving up their power.
All politically connected. All politically connected. And that's part of what we're fighting right now. So you have to do that education from the outside. Don't leave them behind. Do it from the outside. That's why we're in the pickle we're in now, really. But forums like this, see, like this, you wake up what's inside of people. I believe that. I do. That's where the hope comes in.
Okay, thank you, Michelle and Mike. Jean
John,
Carroll.
Yes.
Girls next.
Hi. When I was in DC 37, I was a delegate and I called for one person, one vote. And the delegates all looked at me like I was some, maniac or something like that. And because they were so elitist that they thought that they were the only ones who could make any sensible decisions and the membership didn't know anything. I mean, they were really so elitist. It was gross. And it was torture, actually, being a delegate in the union. I'm now a retiree from there. I'm in PSC. I'm a delegate in the PSC. There's not a whole lot, better, being in the PSC than it was in DC 37. The leadership, by and large, is bureaucratic, and most leaderships are bureaucratic, and which is why we're in the boat that we're in. But I'm a little surprised, frankly, that people are sort of acting as if nothing has changed. I mean, we have elected, the American population has elected a fascist for the next president of the United States. I don't think that we could be talking in the same vein as we were talking about before. We really have to talk about how are we going to unite the working class to fight this threat? Because Project 2025 is already booted up, ready to go. It's just they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. They're going to get rid of the hospitals. They're going to get rid of unions.
That's right.
We need to start talking about not the Healthcare Act, not that I support it 100%, except for that thing caveat with the retirees, but
that's another forum, Carol. I can't hear you.
Carol, your mic is muted.
Somebody muted me. I don't know who it was, but it's okay. So all I'm saying is that we have to really start thinking in a different way, because our right to be a unionist is really up for grabs right now. And so I'm hoping that the next meeting of the people who've organized the MLC will start talking about this tragedy that's befalling the working class and what kind of strategies we need to not allow ourselves to be, to succumb under this, what is a looming dictatorship in the United States. We have to talk about bigger things than just the Healthcare Act, or the health, or this or that. I mean, the whole social situation.
Oh, Carol, can you wrap it up?
Yep. I'm just saying that I think this is small in comparison to what we have to be facing, very soon.
Thank you. Roberta? Roberta, I saw I thought I saw your hand up. Maybe not. Okay.
You're muted.
I was muted. I'm sorry. I'd like to respond to the retiree issue of the New York Health Act. It is written in there that no retiree anywhere in the country will be deprived of the health care that the same level that they have now. It has been adjusted.
That's impressive.
In the law. I mean, in the proposed law. Secondly, it's
Thank you.
You're not the first who hasn't been apprised of that. This is a partial answer to Carol. Some of us are hoping that using New York as an example of what might happen, of
course,
may be a way to counter what's going on in the rest of the country, and that the New York Health Act is a good point to mobilize around because it affects everybody. Is that the best? I don't know, but it's a point of departure.
Yeah, thank you, Roberta. Boy, I don't have any more hands.
Yeah.
There are lots of hands.
There are
Um,
more hands of people who haven't spoken yet.
Read them.
There's Jean is next, followed by Jean, then Martina, then Marshall, then
You got two genes here. You got a pair of genes.
Jean Binder, and then Jean
Yeah.
Taylor.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of quick points, and the one of them was that provision about retirees in other states has been fixed. That is a fact. Number two, I think I could be described as an activist for the New York Health Act, and we have been told time and time again that bill is not going to come up for a vote as long as the municipal unions are opposed to it. So we really got to do something on that front. In terms of the mayoral election, I think if we're going to do anything meaningful, we've got to realize that it's a ranked choice election. And you've got a number of progressives running, and voters are going to be able to draw up a list of their first choice, their second choice, their third choice. And what happens in ranked choice voting is they go down the list and eliminate the people with the least number of votes. And they look at those ballots that have been eliminated and they add the second choice to the next part. And what we need to have is an agreement amongst the progressives that are running that they're going to sort of cross endorse and also say, don't vote for this one. From this list of people, pick your 5 choices. Don't vote for Governor Cuomo if he's running, or Mayor Adams. And we've got to deal with it because that's the way that election works. And finally, the last point I want to make on what Carol said.
Wrap it up, please. Okay, Gene.
Well, I just want to say one thing. You can't ignore the federal, what's going on the federal level. Look at Project 2025 on healthcare. They can do and want to do things which are going to really clobber us and tremendous problems if we did get the New York Health Act passed. So we've got to pay attention to that level too.
Thank you, Gene. Martina? I had Martina on my list.
Hey, hi. I wanted to speak about what more UFT has been doing to push our union, the UFT, to support the New York Health Act. But I also just want to say, as has been said before, and I put in the chat, like the language of the bill is our most powerful weapon, and it's very easy for our unions to pick any number of fallacies, and we're in an age of disinformation, as we know, and so it's up to us to really stay informed in the bill, and I think that's something that this coalition could do. Just briefly, I know we don't have much time. I wanted to say that we have been meeting separately with Senator Rivera regarding the concerns that the UFT has publicly stated. We emailed our AdCom, which is the advisory committee, like the cabinet of the president of the UFT, Michael Mulgrew. We emailed him incessantly. There is a group of us in the More Health Justice Working Group. And, after our full-time jobs, we did some major volunteer time, and we're organizing our union. The very people who are being paid to do union organizing, we're organizing them to do their own jobs. And so here we are, pushing them over and over again to meet. We were successful in meeting with them. It's a longer story, but there were hemming and hawing, and we said, and I encourage everyone to do this, meet with your president, demand a meeting and say, where is the gap? What is the problem that you have with New York Health Act? And then invite them to sit at the table with the sponsors of the bill. So we got Senator Rivera to come to the UFT headquarters at 52 Broadway and to sit down with Michael Mulgrew. That's the first step. Like, we can't allow for there to be a gap in communication. Whatever the issues are, we should demand. See, I see it. Yes, we should demand that there is that there is a sit down, right? Because if our unions are responsive to the rank and file, as they should be, and we can demand that they are, we can say, whatever your issues are, you can dictate that in the bill. The senator wants the bill to pass. He wants union support, and therefore it's in our best interest to continue to pressure our unions. We're also working in parallel with folks from DC 37, which we can continue this work here, but we need to have parallel pushes within and without. We're also flyering in front of our delegate assembly and calling out the fallacies. Okay, sorry. Thank
David Ginsburg.
And John, are we going to have a wrap up soon from each of the
Yes.
speakers?
Okay. Okay. We'll do David and Lisette, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hey everyone, I'm going to be very quick. So, just to let everyone know, the UFT election is in 6 months, and we still don't have our ducks in a row to go against Unity. I know there are a bunch of factions trying to get together, but we need to put all of our differences aside because we're fighting a bigger evil right now. So some of our factions may not be able to get everything we want when we're trying to come to a compromise, but we need to recognize the fact that getting rid of Mulgrew is the biggest obstacle right now, and we could figure out all of the other things later. So whatever your unions want, whatever your caucuses want, whatever my caucus wants, we need to come to a compromise because, again, Mulgrew is like the ringleader of this whole thing, of the healthcare, of everything. So we need to get him out by any means necessary. So even if your specific caucus isn't getting everything that you want when we're trying to plan who's going to run and everything, we need to get our ducks in a row very quickly because we need to organize so we can get him out. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lisette, you'll be the last one. Sorry. We just
Gene
don't have
Carroll
time.
has had his hand up for some time. Gene,
I defer to Gene first, and then I will go after.
Okay, and then we'll wrap it up, and we'll just have a last couple of minutes of a wrap up and where we go next. Okay, Gene, and then Lisette, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you, Gene Carroll, PSC member. Thank you, John, for your work and for everybody who put this together. Real quick, as some of you know, I've been working on the New York Health Act since the 1990s, trying to get labor involved. It's clear to me, underscored by the presentation earlier today about the history of the austerity influenced labor movement. The fundamental reason is that labor in New York City, the public sector unions are institutionally inextricably bound up in the existing capitalist-driven healthcare, public healthcare, the capitalist system's healthcare in the United States of America, the health insurance companies, and pulling that apart in a major way, a fundamental way, which is what the New York Health Act wants to do, which I fully support, is the problem. Number two, so if that's the problem, if it's that deep, that pervasive, what do we do? What's a strategy? You can't just say you support it. You have to have a strategy that helps to unlock those obstacles. Number one interesting strategy is, think of the UAW. They went through a major internal revolution to change their leadership. And now it's engaged in serious, deep organizing in the areas where everybody said it needs to organize, which is the Deep South. The rank and file movements to change leadership are essential strategy for getting the long-term changes that we need. If that doesn't happen and the MLC and the leaders aren't changed, it's not going to move. One final thing, I think we should propose to the New York State legislature to change the Taylor law so that retirees have the right to vote in public sector unions. It may not pass, but it will be a freak out to people who would be freaked out by it, and it will begin to help open this discussion about democracy and transparency.
Gene, okay, thanks a lot, Gene. Good seeing you. Lisette, and then I know there's other people who want to speak, but given the time, Lisette is going to be the last one.
I love that freak out. Let's go for that. I love that freak out. I think that one of the points of this forum was to discuss the MLC. And I will like to go back to what Mike was proposing at the beginning. When are we going to be questioning our own unions? What is the role of our unions to be part of an organization that does not represent us well? I would like to go back to what Antonia was proposing, that the actives have to see the relationship between our healthcare struggle with the promise that they're going to be encountering, and they're going to be encountering very soon, because they're going to be taking away healthcare rights that they're supposed to have. And by the time that we wake up, I mean, the actives wake up, it's going to be too late. So I hope that out of this forum, just like the first one, we keep educating the people that are still working so that they will see the relationship. And let's make sure that we, just like Olivia was saying, keep fighting. I mean, it cannot be peaches and cream with the leaders. The leaders have to be questioned, and not because they're questioned, we are supposed to be called anti-union. Let's question our leaders, and if they have to be taken out, let's take them out. But let's keep fighting, let's keep educating, and let's keep organizing together as unions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lizette. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up with is a brief last commentary by the presenters. I'm going to pass, and so we would go to Mike and then the other presenters for a very brief sum up. Go ahead, Mike.
Brief sum up. I think the demands that I suggested of transparency and democracy are demands that can be understood by all union members. And I think in all of our unions, I mean, all the activists in all of our unions, I think can and should be organizing around those demands. And that will bring the question of the MLC to the fore and all its decisions, including New York Health Act, et cetera. So I think to unify us as a cross-union rank-and-file movement, and that would be a hope, that would be a step. I think those demands would be useful.
Thank you. Okay, Nick? Is Nick still with us?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I guess just to wrap up quickly, a lot has been said about, hey, what can the in-service do to get organizing? And it's true. The healthcare, at least when it comes to healthcare specifically, in-service has not been where the retirees are in terms of organizing. There was a survey we put out. We got about 10,000 people. We would have need 20,000 signatures. That's half of what we only got half of that to try to bring this to the UFT executive board, and it didn't happen. It remains to be seen if there's a major change, if we'll see that organizing happen. But I think a lot of us are becoming hopeful that the opposition groups are going to come together and put together a slate that can really win this and run our union in a very different way. And that's where I'll end.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, I think, the future of unions in New York City, I don't think, and public sector institutions in general, has never been more uncertain with this presidential election. And I think that perhaps since, Giuliani and perhaps since the 75 fiscal crisis, I think Trump will target New York State specifically, and our municipal budget will be under pressure. Medicaid will be under threat. It's a huge source of funding for our public hospital system. We need to build a degree of rank and file power that gives our leaders no choice but to make a radical turn towards combativity and towards ambitious vision in terms of what we actually need to change. We might, in different places, we might not be able to change them or replace them directly. The UFT election is going to be huge in this regard, but in some places we might not be able to change them immediately or swiftly, but we can still build campaigns and pressure them to make different decisions in the meantime. This is true in NYSNA as well. We need more democracy. We need to be stronger on single payer. NYSNA has not made actually great MLC decisions, even though it wouldn't be decisive one way or the other. They haven't been the worst, but they haven't been the best either. But I'm going to bring it back down to issues that we can say we need to build this power, but what actually builds it is meeting people where they're at and actually organizing what people care about, actually organizing around what people care about and what people perceive as impacting them. It might take some of these jolts. It might take us members realizing that we actually are going to have to pay healthcare premium. That could be it. It might be something that Trump does. But in that, we have to have everything on the table, whether that's strikes, breaking the Taylor law, any number of campaigns, and so on. But I think that we do have to focus on organizing people and meeting people where they're at, and what they are willing to fight around.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sean. Michelle.
Thank you, John, and thank you for all the warriors for your hope and respect here this evening. Finish with a final quote. Here is the very nature of grassroots organizing. We need to dig in so deep that we cannot be weeded out. Mary Crowley, Jackson School teacher in New Jersey.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Olivia, last words.
Wow, last words. Thank you, everyone. It was really great to hear from people within the forum, and I learned a lot tonight. I just want to say that one of our guiding principles within MORE, and we get it from Labor Notes and Ellen David Friedman specifically, is that we need to look out for power, not up. We can have our sights set up. We should be aware of who are the power players, but power comes from us looking at each other right now and hearing each other struggle, connecting, and especially if we can connect across sectors, but also across generations. There really is not much that can stop us then. And so we should be aware of who is in power, but we should not let them stop us. And we need to look at each other, because that's where our strength is going to come from. And that ultimately is how we're going to win. There's a lot riding on our UFT election. And even if we don't put someone who's not Mulgrew in, it doesn't mean we won't stop fighting. It means we're going to just keep fighting as hard as we've been fighting. But we do that together, in a spirit together, and meeting people where they're at and building strong campaigns that people can plug into. So thank you, everybody. And it's been really great being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And we'll keep working. We'll keep fighting. We'll keep trying to figure out what the next steps are. If you have any suggestions, don't hesitate to contact the folks through the internet, through email, and look forward to seeing you all again.